We're back, and Jimmy, as we conclude the latest edition of Thursday Night
Mhm.
Tide here in the next 15 minutes or so,
Yeah,
what we were going to get into was specific to Jalen Milroe and the importance
right.
of this start. And I know I talked
Yep,
about this with Charlie Potter yesterday here on our YouTube channel. It's like we have this conversation almost every week in relation to
right,
Jalen. I'm of the belief that short term, regardless of what happens pretty much on Saturday, and especially if he's healthy coming out of the game, I totally expect that even if Alabama loses this game, Jalen Milroe is going to be back out there against Arkansas the next week. Now, how it could impact him big picture wise, it's all a part of the big bowl or pot of soup that everything goes into with evaluations and understanding that there is some confidence about Dylan Lonergan. There is some anticipation in regards to Julian Sayin coming in as the
right.
number one quarterback for the 2024 cycle. Where do you kind of stand on all that with Jalen?
I think Jalen, I agree with you 100% that in the short term, Jalen Milroe is fine. I think it would take more than one poor performance to change Alabama's starting quarterback situation in 2023. I think he's sort of locked that up pending multiple bad starts. And regardless of what happens in College Station, I fully expect him to be the starting quarterback against Arkansas. I think where it gets interesting because reportedly the staff is very high on Lonergan and Julian Sand, not only coming in with, 5 stars attached to his name, but coming in with the idea that he's sort of polished and mature and maybe a guy who could play quickly because not all of them can, even not all of the 5 stars are capable of playing quickly. Maybe Sand is. So keeping that in context, the idea that's out there for Jalen is what about monster performances? What if would Jalen change the long term forecast for Jalen Milroe at Alabama with a monster performance even this weekend? I think the answer to that is yes. I think there's a lot to be gained for Jalen with a monster game. Now, I'm not talking about, he was very efficient in Starkville. That was fine. The 10 of 12, making better decisions, being a little more decisive, far from perfect, still some growing pains. We're talking about a guy only making his 6th start in a college career this weekend at College Station. But I do think that a monster performance on the road against a perceived very good defense, Jalen could be quarterback at Alabama for quite a while if he starts putting some monster performances on the road against good teams on the ledger.
Yeah, and we talk about passes and thresholds for number of pass attempts for Jalen in this game. I don't think 12 is going to do it this week against this A&M team. But the most important passes are the ones that you maybe worry about the most right now are coming from the center to the quarterback on the shotgun snap. So there's a lot more to it than just Jalen, as we know. You talked a little bit earlier about Alabama's receivers. And while there hasn't been, Alabama right now doesn't have a receiver in the top 28 receivers in the SEC in receiving yards per game. But the
That's
other side
crazy.
of that is when you look at yards per catch, they've got 5 guys right now that are 15 plus. So they've been getting explosive plays and they've been getting them from more than one guy. So that's something that, again, I think for Alabama, especially, explosive play potential in this game is real on Saturday.
There used to be a commercial. I'm sort of butchering this. It had to do with that, like most interesting man in the world commercials that used to run over a decade ago, or when me and you were younger, which, as we know, is a long time ago. And it had something to do with it's kind of sounded like this, and it's where it fits that Alabama offense. That we don't throw the ball to the receivers much,
Dos
but
Equis,
when
yeah,
we do,
yeah,
we throw for touchdowns.
and
And
big
and
chunks.
it's yeah, and that's the way that it's worked with that receiving crew. Alabama just 12 attempts last week. There haven't been a ton of pass attempts to outside receivers going back to game one. When you add it all up, I think I saw something earlier today, Travis, that Alabama's near dead last in FBS football in terms of forward passes completed is ranks way low. And
Right.
it's not that Alabama hasn't been efficient with it. They are. It's been an efficient passing attack, and there's been lots of big plays downfield. The percentage of success is good when they try it, when they do it. There just hasn't been a lot of it. Now, when would that change? It would change if Alabama got behind. It might change if Alabama has no success on the ground against an A&M front and they've got to throw the ball more. But where Alabama fans should feel pretty good, Travis, is when they've done it, it looks pretty good.
And we talk so much about this A&M front, and I get it. It's legit, man. 30 tackles for loss in the last 2 games for A&M.
Ridiculous.
So, with all that in mind, how the hell did Alabama run for 288 last year? I mean, I know the easy answer to that, Jahmyr Gibbs. Um, but it wasn't like it was a struggle in what he
Right.
did in that game last year. I keep kind of wanting to sort of understand what has changed. One of the answers I got was that A&M was so poor at inside linebacker, it almost didn't matter what happened. But if you're stout enough up front, you can play a lot of people at inside linebacker and they can get by. And that was the Jahmyr Gibbs season highlight tape in some ways in that game against A&M last year.
Yeah, it really was. And, what way I chalked it up last year, Travis, this is probably a little wrong, but X's and O's wise, I think particularly when Milroe was new, teams were extremely focused on spying on Jalen Milroe. They were assigning an inside linebacker to Jalen and telling that inside linebacker, look, this kid is not going to throw the ball. He's going to run the ball and he's going to run it himself. So you spy Milroe and you make sure that he doesn't hurt us in the run game as badly as he could. And when that happens, the opposition is taking a run stuffing linebacker basically off the field and out of the mix in terms of defending the running back from inside runs. This guy's so focused on Milroe, he's not looking at Gibbs. He's looking at Jalen Milroe, and I think that's why it's not a coincidence that Gibbs' biggest games were when Milroe was the quarterback in 2022. It's because the other team was committing a spy to Milroe, and it gave Gibbs a lot more room. That's my theory, or that's what I'm going with. But frankly, the number is so significant, Travis, that I'm not sure that explains it enough.
No,
I just think
I
I think
think
it's
it
part of
could.
it.
I think it could, at least in large part, because a year ago, Alabama's bread and butter with Gibbs was the outside zone. So you would get him working the perimeter. And if you are keeping a linebacker over here, away from the play, it's not like running inside zone and keeping a
Mhm.
guy in there with Jalen. You're running away from that. And now you're minus an inside linebacker. That absolutely could play into it. And it makes me think, even though this offense, it seems like it's been more between the tackles oriented than it was a year ago, maybe we see more of that and try to attract that same type of attention. And then, even if Jalen keeps it a couple times and doesn't go for explosive chunks, you will have accomplished something perhaps important. Now, that doesn't necessarily suit, I don't think, the style of, say, Roydell Williams, but we saw Jace McClellan last year. Texas was an outside zone that he popped for 80, 81. Maybe that's a good thing for Jace on Saturday if that's more of the approach, at least more of a mix to go along with what we've seen to this point. So the Alabama defense, we kind of switched back to that. If I give you an over/under for Texas A&M rushing yards,
Sure.
understanding that a year ago with Devon Achan, it was A-Chain last year, it's Achan now apparently, they did not rush for more than, I don't think, 100 yards in Tuscaloosa. So let's say I put it at 110 and a half, just throwing a number
Okay.
out there. You think A&M goes over that Saturday? I mean, after
I,
seeing Mississippi State do what it did, maybe, or
I don't. I don't. I think in terms of how I see the game playing out, I don't think A&M is going to rush for over 110. The bad news, I'm not sure Alabama is either. But I don't think A&M is going to have a ton of success on the ground. I think they'll have some success but I'm anticipating the offense that we see, the offense that produces points or produces drives that end in field goals, and I think we're going to see several field goals. I see that mostly through the air for both teams, uh, as I think both teams will just really commit to stopping the run and forcing Jalen Milroe to beat you with his arm, forcing Max Johnson to beat you with his arm. And I would go under on that A&M, but just in terms of a general principle, I don't think either team is going to have a ton of success on the ground Saturday. I think the front sevens are just too good.
Yeah, I think both these kickers have already made 11 field goals. Obviously, Will's 11 for 11, but A&M's attempted 15. And then you go look at red zone conversion rate as far as touchdowns are concerned. Neither of these teams are anywhere close to the top of the SEC. So it's kind of a good news, bad news, right? You got these
Yeah.
kickers, they're obviously capable. But touchdown conversion rate in a game like this, yeah, you're right. I think there's going to be 4 or 5, maybe 6 field goals between these two teams. But that's going
Mhm.
to make who can actually convert
Convert.
when they
Yeah.
have opportunities all the more precious.
One missed field goal by either team is going to be huge. I
Mhm.
think, like exactly like I said, converting your field goal opportunities, because those may be your more consistent opportunities to score. I think both teams, when they get in the end zone, Travis, I'm sort of imagining it big plays, both sides. Max Johnson to Noah Thomas or Moose Muhammad or Anais Smith, and Jalen Milroe to Isaiah Bond or Jermaine Burton or Amari Nyblack. Uh,
Mhm.
Big plays resulting in touchdowns, drives that die at the 30. That there needs to be long field goals for either team to score.
Yeah, you're a big recruiting guy. I've been in it forever as well. So, man, when you look at this Alabama team for Saturday, Uh, big game for a lot of Texans or the Texans on this roster. I mean, Jalen, obviously, but you could see Jalen Hale at the wide receiver position, Jace McClellan, Kendrick Blackshire. Um, these are some of the guys that could really go a long way in determining that outcome. And they don't want to get Texas two-stepped after already losing to the Longhorns.
Well, one good thing about the recruiting thing, Alabama fans that follow recruiting and everyone that's a subscriber to Bama Online understands at BOL how well recruiting is covered there. That's why all the Alabama fans listening. Do you know why you can name all the Texas A&M defensive linemen? You can name them all. You couldn't name them at Mississippi State other than maybe Pickering. You can't name them at Arkansas. Try to name the Tennessee defensive lineman right now. You can't. But you know who you can name? Shamar Turner,
McKinley,
McKinley Jackson, Walter
Nolan.
Nolan, LT Overton. You know why you can name them? Because Alabama recruited those guys hard,
Yeah,
and they were high priorities for Alabama, and they all ended up at A&M, and now they're all proving that most of them were worthy of the recruiting hype. That's a outstanding front that A&M has, and Alabama fans are all too familiar. That said, Alabama's going to have a few guys that Texas A&M recruiting fans, they're like, oh, yeah, I remember Jalen Hale. I remember Blackshire, McClellan, maybe even Jam Miller makes a big play
yeah,
Saturday in front of his home state crowd. Both these teams have a lot of success on the recruiting trail.
absolutely. Going to be a lot of fun. I mean, you've already told us that Reichard's going to win it with a field goal at the gun. So, right? I mean,
I
we,
did.
we don't we don't need to tune
I did.
in. We can
That was
we can
too
spare
specific.
ourselves that.
That prediction was too specific, but really my larger point is I see this game being decided by one play. I think
Hmm.
one play late in the game decides it. It just might be Alabama's turn, and because A&M won this on a walk off field goal last time around. But the last time he was in Texas, Will Reichard won the game in Austin, and Reichard could do it the Texas two step,
His
uh,
own.
his second his second game-winning kick in that state. So that's what I'm predicting. But really, that was just a message that, hey, guys, this is going to come down to one play at the end.
Yeah, you talk about every kick being important, and it wasn't a great game for Will against A&M last year. But you know what? The 50-yarder he made early in the game, It looked big at the end when A&M needed to get in the end zone and couldn't just kick it. If he had gone over, he missed two, but if he had gone over, it's probably a different outcome, maybe a second straight year that A&M wins it with a kick. Well, Jimmy, as always, a lot of fun catching up with you here on Thursday Night Tide. Appreciate you and Clint and everyone who checked in too. It's been a lot of fun. We overcame some adversity, so that's good for us. Even at our advanced ages, we're maybe a little more poised and calm than we would have been 30 years ago. But all's well that ends well. And again, Jimmy, have a great weekend. I look forward to doing this again next week.
Hey, hopefully we'll have a very celebratory show next Thursday. We hope so.
Yeah, no doubt about it. So for Jimmy Stein, Clint Lamb, and for you as well, contributing to the show, we certainly appreciate that. Travis Reier, hoping you have a great weekend. And until next time on the YouTube home for BamaOnline.com, so long, everybody.